I'm here to introduce the book Everdark by Abi Elphinstone. In this story there is lots of adventure and magic. There is even a talking monkey. This story is about a young girl who sets out to save the magic of 3 kingdoms from a harpy who is trying to steal it. My favourite character is Bartholomew the monkey because he's been enchanted to talk and he wears a trilby hat. I really enjoyed this book because it is adventurous and full of surprises.
Thank you, Molly Fulton, for that lovely video. And hello, everybody at Big Dog Festival. I'm Abi Elphinstone, and I write fast-paced adventure books filled with magic. Now, I used to think when I was at school that the people who got to become authors were the people that were so unbelievably clever that they just looked at a blank sheet of paper and then a story tumbled out. But the more writing I've done, the more authors I've met, I've realised that's not it at all. All you guys need to write an incredible story is an idea that nobody else has stumbled across yet. And I like to find my ideas through adventures, both close to home and far, far away, and through accidental daydreams. So today I'm going to talk to you about adventures, close to home ones, far away ones, daydreams. I'm going to show you props linked to my books. Some of you are going to know what they are. Some of you are going to think, why on earth has she got that? I'm so glad she's doing a virtual visit and she's not actually at home in my house or in my classroom. So we are going to kick off with a question for you guys, and you're going to have to think of the answer obviously in your head and imagine what the answer might be. So do you think when I was in year 2 that I wanted to be an author when I was older? So hands up for, yeah, I think you wanted to be an author. Hands up for no, I don't think you wanted to be an author. So no is the right answer. When I was in year 2, I wanted to be a unicorn, as you can see from this slide here. So when I realised that this was ridiculous and I wasn't going to make much money or many friends, I decided to rethink things. And I decided to become a teacher. And it was when I was teaching that I thought back to the books I loved when I was your age, the books with short chapters and big adventures. And I thought, I want to write one of those. So the first thing I did was think back to my childhood. So I grew up in Scotland. I grew up at the foot of a glen in Angus. And I grew up spending weekends scrambling across the moors, jumping into icy rivers, building dens in the woods, climbing trees. And I ended up using every single place that I explored as a child in Scotland as a setting in my first book, The Dream Snatcher. So The Dream Snatcher is the first book in a trilogy. It goes Dream Snatcher, Shadowkeeper, Night Spinner. So every single place that the characters explore is somewhere I explored as a little girl. Now, on that note, I wonder if you can tell me in this next slide who you think this is. So one school said, is it God in Wellington boots? Another school said, is it a giant ape? Neither of those things. It's actually my dad. And that photo was taken when I was in year 4. And my dad climbed to the top of a hazel tree, chopped down a branch and gave it to me. And I thought, well, that's a bit random. Why have you done that? And Dad said, see if you can carve a catapult out of that branch. So I got a Swiss Army knife, like a little pen knife, and I whittled away at this branch. I cut it down to a 3-pronged stick, and then I whittled away at the bark. You can see I've taken off the bark there. The bark is attached still to the handle. I got some rubber tubing and a hair bobble and a rubber band and a small pouch of leather. And I attached that to those 2 sticks. And if you were to put, I don't know, an acorn or a piece of wood or even a stone in the back there and pull back to your jaw and then fire, you've got a catapult. So I thought nothing of this. I just thought it was something fun to do with my dad when I was in year 4. And then years later, I ended up writing this book, The Dream Snatcher. And The Dream Snatcher is the story of 3 kids living wild in the woods. And they are armed with catapults. You can see on the cover, one of the characters there has a catapult. They're armed with catapults, a wild cat, and a ton of magic. And they've got to find 3 secret objects, the amulets of truth. And they're hidden in curses and steeped in riddles. And they've got to find those objects to stop a witch doctor's dark magic spreading across the land. So I thought nothing of this catapult at the time, but it wound its way into my story. So wherever you guys live, you can pinch the rivers, borrow the trees, steal the mountains and put them in books of your own. I always say that I think I'm a writer because the wilderness in Scotland made me one. But you can pinch indoor things as well. It doesn't need to just be outdoor things. So before lockdown, way before lockdown, I was out shopping. And I don't know if you know a shop called TK Maxx. There might be one near you guys. And I went into TK Maxx and I bought some shower gel. Got home, looked at the name, Pecksniff. And I thought, that's a stupid name for a shower gel. And then I thought a little longer and thought, that's actually quite a cool surname. So I have ended up naming one of the main characters in the Dream Snatcher, Moll Pecksniff, after a shower gel in TK Maxx. So it goes to show you guys that you can get story ideas absolutely anywhere. I pinch names from street signs, gravestones, and I bung them in stories of my own. And it can be even more random than that. The other day I opened my fridge door in the kitchen and a whole carton of yogurt fell out and went splodge on the floor. And I was looking at the dollops of yogurt on the floor and just thinking, oh, got to clean that up. And I thought, dollop, that's a really cool word. No one really says it much. It's cool to say aloud. It'd be quite a cool character name. So I've got a book coming in June called The Crackledawn Dragon, and there is a character called Dollop in that book. In another random way of finding a story idea, my toddler, my 3-year-old, had a nightmare the other night, and he was crying out in his sleep. So I ran up the stairs to his bedroom to see what was wrong, and I opened the door of his bedroom, and he was still asleep, crying out. And in his sleep, he cried, "Mom, don't cut my toenails." I was like, what, you random child? But that sentence has found its way into The Crackledawn Dragon, the book that's out in June. So yeah, stories can be totally, totally random. And there are a few ideas of stories close to home. Now, I travelled a little bit further away to write my 4th book, Sky Song. So this is a story about an eagle huntress, an inventor boy, and an organ made of icicles. And when I was thinking about the snowy kingdom of Erkenwald, and incidentally, Erkenwald, the kingdom name, I stole from a street sign in London when I used to live there. I was waiting for a bus near Barking and there was a street called Erkenwald. So again, random stealing of ordinary things around you and putting them in a story of your own. So the story is set in this snowy kingdom called Erkenwald, and I was trying to come up with a heroine and a hero who might live at the very edges of our world, somewhere really remote in a snowy land. And I came across this photo you can see on the PowerPoint. And I remember looking at it and thinking, something exciting is happening here. What's going on? So I read the little caption below and it said, there is a tribe of people in Mongolia called the Kazakh eagle hunters. They use golden eagles to hunt for them. And they treat these eagles really well, almost as part of their family. And they release them back into the wild when they're ready to breed. And I thought that was lovely. And I carried on reading and it said, every single person in this tribe is a man or a boy. And I thought, well, that's a bit rubbish. Where are the girls? And then there was one last sentence and it said, but there is one eagle huntress in the Kazakh eagle hunting tribe, and she's called Aishulpan, and she's 11 years old. And when I saw that sentence, there's one eagle huntress in Mongolia, she's 11 years old, I thought, I want to write her into a story. I want to put her in a book. What if I could get out to Mongolia to meet this girl and write her story? So we're not going to Mongolia right now with lockdowns and things, but one day the world is going to open up and hopefully we'll be able to explore these incredible remote regions of our world again. If you want to write about a girl and an eagle, though, you don't need to go to Mongolia, obviously. But I did have the opportunity to go myself, and I thought, I want to see if I can get to the place where this little girl lives so I could meet her. Now, there was an eagle hunting festival happening in one place on one certain date out in Mongolia. And I thought, if the best eagle hunters in the land are coming to show off their skills with their golden eagles in this one place on one certain date, maybe she'll be there and I could find her and meet her. So I went out to Mongolia and I trekked for days and days through the wilderness to try and find this festival. So this is Bear Valley that you can see on your screens. Even the name Bear Valley, you could pop into a story of your own. So we pitched tents, we pitched camp in Bear Valley because we had to walk for many days before we found the festival. And out in Mongolia, you don't sleep in a tent, you sleep in a ger, G-E-R. There you go, a little felt house. And it's about, could fit about 30 people inside. And there's a little chimney because there's a fire in the middle that you have, a campfire. It was so cold when this fire went out in the night that my eyelashes froze shut in the middle of the night. My water bottle was a clump of ice in the morning. And when I stepped out of the ger, when the sun rose, all around me, there was snow and ice. And in the snow, the footprints of wolves. They hadn't been there when I went to bed. So the wolves must have come down in the night, circled my camp while I slept, and then left. And that's what I love about the wild, that it can come silently, secretly. Sometimes the only reason you know it's come in the first place is because there's a footprint in the snow the next morning. So I went out to Mongolia looking for eagles and eagle huntresses. I ended up finding out a lot about wolves. And the guide I was with gave me this. I'm going to show you really close up. So this is a wolf fang decorated with silver and a jewel. I didn't know this when I went out to Mongolia, but out there I discovered that the Mongolian women make earrings and pendants for necklaces out of wolf fangs. And it got me thinking, what about having a boy character alongside this eagle huntress girl, a boy called Flint? And maybe he could have an earring like this. And when he takes it out of his ear, he could use it to unpick a lock to somewhere incredibly secret and cool. I'm not going to tell you where that secret place is, but you find out in the story when Flint uses this to unpick a lock. So on I went through Bear Valley to find Aishulpan, and here she is, 11 years old, on the left, riding her horse with her golden eagle on her arm. Golden eagles can be 7 kilograms in weight, a wingspan of 2 meters. That's like a huge barn door. And there she was, just riding so calmly, so bravely, and she was hugely strong. I held the eagle, that's me on the right, in her hat, holding the eagle, and it was so heavy. I had to almost use my other arm as a prop to keep it up. But she was much, much stronger than me, even though she was much, much younger. So we rode up to the top of the mountains together, and Aishulpan loosed her golden eagle at the top of this mountain. So she loosed the eagle and it circled in the sky, and then it dived. I wonder if you can have a think of what animal this golden eagle dived for that the huntress or hunter might really need. So it's a fox, a marmot, or a wolf. They've all got one thing in common: fur. Remember what I was saying about my eyelashes freezing shut in the middle of the night because of the cold? It's freezing, especially in the winter in Mongolia. So the eagle huntress uses the golden eagle to hunt for an animal, and then the huntress uses that fur from those animals to make clothes. So you can see there, Aishulpan has got a wolf-trimmed jacket and a fox fur hat to keep herself warm. We wouldn't wear real fur. It's considered immoral, illegal in some places. But out in Mongolia, you've not got shops to buy clothes from. You can't go to H&M or New Look or TK Maxx to buy a bobble hat and a jacket to keep warm. Look behind me in the photo. Nothing. It's the wilderness. This is the wild. And the wild plays by very different rules. So we can see here, we've got a real Mongolian fox fur hat. This is what Aishulpan's eagle dived for, and she then made. You can see this is the body, the leg, the tail, the head. If I was in your classroom, I'd be getting you to try this on, and not only would you say that it absolutely stinks still, it also makes your head so warm within seconds. That's what real fur does. So this is Aishulpan's fox fur hat. And you'll be pleased to know that this hat and Aishulpan herself and Flint the inventor boy, all ideas that sprung up in Mongolia on that adventure, found their way into Sky Song. Now, my brand new series of books, the Unmapped Chronicles, which Molly kindly introduced us to with Everdark at the beginning of the talk, this all started as an accidental daydream, a what if in here. Don't know if you can have a think of what this place is. One school said, is it a chicken coop? Another school said, is it a public toilet? And I want to reassure you guys at Big Dog Festival that I didn't come up with my brand new series idea sitting on the loo. This is actually my writing shed. Because if you go inside, you'll see that it's a lot bigger than it looks initially. So you've got my writing desk on the photo on the top right. And you've got my armchair where I sit and write my stories and doodle ideas. And then bottom left, you've got my ideas collector. So it's a wooden box split up into compartments, because sometimes when I'm writing one story, I get a really good idea for another story, but I'm not quite ready to write it down yet, that actual story. So I store my ideas up. So you can see in this ideas collector, I've got a compartment for portals, magical motifs, remote cultures, names. And I think there's a name in there. I've written pickle. Haven't used that for a book yet. But ideas are enormously powerful. They can change the world, spark revolutions, stir up stories. And all you need, as I said at the beginning of this talk, to write an unbelievable book is an idea that nobody else has stumbled across yet. So store your ideas up, and you guys can do an ideas collector with an empty egg box. So buy some eggs, eat the eggs, or if you're lucky enough to have chickens, you don't need to buy the eggs, you can just get them from your garden. But you get rid of the eggs, and then you've got 6 compartments. Label each compartment as a different type of idea. Maybe you've got quirky methods of transport, invented words. Maybe you've got cool or funny things that your best mate says in, I don't know, the classroom when they're not meant to be talking, or at break time or whatever. Really annoying things that your mum nags you for. Log up all these ideas. And then after a week, sometimes after just a day, you've got a treasure trove of ideas ready to start your own book. So I was sitting in this writing shed, and I thought back to all the incredible skies that I've seen on my adventures over the years. So I thought of orange sunsets, the rain that conjures rainbows and makes waterfalls roar, and the snow that makes jewelry out of spider webs. And I started thinking, what if our grown-ups have got it all wrong about our skies? What if it's not science and geography behind the weather, but magic? What if there are 4 secret kingdoms, Rumblestar, Jungle Drop, Crackledawn and Silver Crag, filled to the brim with magical beasts, all beavering away to make weather for our world? They could be drizzle hags brewing rain in giant cauldrons, or snow trolls mixing moon wisp and cloud syrup to make snow. And so this idea of these unmapped kingdoms came about. So each book in this series is a standalone adventure. You don't need to read them in order. If you want to read them in order, you go Everdark first, and then Rumblestar, Jungle Drop, and then the Crackledawn Dragon that comes out in June. But each book is an adventure about a different child, some from our world, some from the Unmapped Kingdoms, who go on adventures to try and save the world and save this unmapped magic, because it's being stolen by an evil monster called Morg, an evil harpy. And it's up to these children to step in and save the day. They've got to save the unmapped magic, which in turn saves our world, which relies on the unmapped magic for its weather. So you can see here with Everdark, the first book in the series, it opens in a sea kingdom called Crackledawn, where sunlight is made for our world. So at the beginning of Everdark, it is midnight, and it's a midnight full of magic. Silver whales are surfacing beneath the full moon. Sea dragons are stirring in the depths of the ocean. Everybody in Crackledawn is waiting for a phoenix to rise up from the forests of Everdark and renew the unmapped magic, keep all the magic and the weather going. But something else rises up from the forests of Everdark instead, an evil harpy called Morg. And she lays a curse on every single person in Crackledawn. And every single person is turned into a motionless shadow. They can't move. Every single person apart from one, this girl in the bottom left called Smudge. So she escapes the harpy's curse. And this is because she's somewhere she shouldn't be on the night of the rising. And this is because there are 2 types of children in the world. There's the type who, when told to go to bed, just go to bed. Then there's the type who, when told to go to bed, get into their bed, close their eyes, and pretend to nod off. But then moments later, they're found scaling down a drain pipe and going on an adventure, or creeping down the corridor to find their sibling and get up to naughty things. So Smudge is one of these kids. She's always off on midnight escapades and adventures. And normally the things she finds make her laugh, make her excited or interested. But what she finds tonight, on the night of the rising, horrifies her. She sees this evil harpy, and she realizes that she is the only person left who can save Crackledawn from ruin and save our world, which relies on Crackledawn for its sunlight. And this is a bit problematic because Smudge is the unlikeliest of heroines. I like writing about heroes and heroines who don't look like they're going to save the world, but who go on and do it anyway. So Smudge is late for everything. She's easily distracted. She always finishes bottom of the class, and the less said about her spelling, the better. She's actually dyslexic. I don't say that in the book. There's not a word for dyslexia in the Unmapped Kingdoms, but she is dyslexic, and she's a bit like me. I'm dyslexic, and I didn't know that at school. But I did know that I had trouble organising ideas and following instructions correctly, and my spelling wasn't very good. And I thought, I think, as a young girl, that, I could never be an author when I grow up, or I could never achieve anything of note. But every single person in the world has a talent. Some people, their talent might be really obvious. They could be super sporty, or really clever, or great at music or art. Then other people have a quieter sort of talent. They might be really kind, very brave. They might notice things that other people miss. And these are incredible skills. Sometimes it's these exact skills that you need to go on and change the world. And this is exactly like Smudge. So she finds herself on this epic voyage alongside a really grumpy monkey called Bartholomew, who Molly mentioned in her introduction. And they've got to go on this epic voyage aboard an enchanted boat to outwit ogre eels, sail past sea witches, and then get past the legendary Northswirl, a huge wave the size of a cathedral in height. And they've got to do that in order to save Crackledawn and our world from ruin. Now, to write Everdark, I ended up drawing on my summers out in Norway. So again, this is before lockdown days. But my husband is Norwegian. Cool fact, his great-great-grandfather invented the fish finger on a boat out in these waters. So every summer we go out to visit his family, and they live on a tiny island in the middle of the sea in the southern fjords of Norway. And when we go out in the summer, we live off what we can catch in the sea. So you can see from this next slide, we dive down for mussels and oysters. We put nets down to try and catch turbot and sole and cod and mackerel. We catch lobsters and crabs in pots that we put down to the bottom of the ocean. And we're kayaking, we're diving, we're cliff jumping. We're almost always out at sea. A bit like sort of Bear Grylls, but with toddlers and newborn babies chucked in as well. And it made me think about communities of people who might live at sea almost exclusively, not just for a summer holiday like me. And I came across a community of people called the Baju people. They live out at sea around the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. And they are an incredible community. So they have lived so long out at sea that their bodies have adapted to the ocean. They can dive down to depths of 200 feet with no oxygen cylinders. They can hold their breath for 13 minutes underwater. Incredible. And it got me thinking about this culture and how I could maybe have my own culture of people who live in Crackledawn, in this book Everdark, who live almost exclusively out at sea. And they've actually got special gills that if they eat something in particular, it enables these gills to work and they can breathe underwater. But it was the sea itself in Norway that set my mind reeling with ideas for the magical sea kingdom itself. So out in Norway, the waves rise up as high as monsters. Sunlight bobs on the ocean like clusters of fallen stars. But it's often what's going on underneath the surface of the sea, I think, that sings with the biggest kind of magic. So you can see from this next slide, there are humpback whales that swim through the ocean trying to catch krill. So they can consume a massive 3,000 pounds of krill, tiny sea creatures, every single day. That is the equivalent of you guys eating 1,500 pizzas every single day. Can you imagine? So out in Norway, there are basking sharks, huge sharks you can see on the bottom right, that swim with their mouths wide open in the hope of catching fish eggs and shrimp. And then bottom left, you can see white-beaked cod. They race through the ocean trying to track down cod. So these dolphins do, sorry, they track down the cod. So I started thinking about all this wonder and wildness and how I could create sea creatures in Everdark. So I've got a type of shark. I've got a ghost shark, which is based on this basking shark. I've got silver whales based on the humpback whale. I've got multicolored dolphins based on those white-beaked dolphins there. And I've also got sea hoppers. They're water frogs who are really fond of burping the alphabet backwards. And I've got squidges. They are squids who are fond of hugging. So I'm always asked, how on earth do you turn all these ideas into a book? You've got lots of ideas for sea creatures and people who live in a magical kingdom. How do you turn that into a book? I think there are 4 really easy, really quick steps. And if you do each one well, I think you guys are in with a chance of writing an unputdownable adventure book. So the first thing is imagining what your kingdom will look like, what your landscape will look like when your characters get to their magical world. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm dyslexic. When I sit down to write a story, my ideas are a total mess. So I draw my way into my stories. So for Sky Song, that's the map from Sky Song you can see on your screen there, I knew I wanted to write about a snowy kingdom. So I got a piece of paper and I sketched out a snowy kingdom. I put a forest called Deep Roots there. I put Winterfang Palace, a palace made exclusively of icicles. The Groaning Splinters, huge icebergs in the north of the kingdom. Devil's Dance Floor, a black iced lake. And I started to imagine this snowy kingdom, and I'll show you how a plot takes shape a little bit later. With Rumblestar, this book is set in a sky kingdom. So I imagined a whole kingdom set up above the clouds. So there's a castle built on the back of a sleeping cloud giant. There's the Witch's Fingers River. Witches apparently have 3 fingers. So that's why that river has 3 tributaries. And for Jungle Drop, I wanted to write about a glow-in-the-dark rainforest. So I sketched out what I imagined a glow-in-the-dark rainforest would look like. The blazing ridges that are so covered in golden flowers that they look like they're glowing. The elderwood, which is filled with gobblequick trees, trees that grow sweeties, but also gobble you as well. Snaggletooth caves, and then danger alert, the bone lands in the north of the kingdom. So for Everdark, we're set in the kingdom of Crackledawn, which is a sea kingdom. So I sketched out a sea world. I imagined endless falls, the waterfalls. I imagined the sighing caves, and the mouths of the caves actually open and shut and sigh. The Northswirl, that huge wave as high as a church spire, a cathedral, as I was telling you about earlier. So I get my world, I've sketched it out. It can be really messy. These are all maps that are drawn by my illustrators. So they've taken my rough ideas and made them really professional. So you don't need to be able to draw to do this. You sketch out a world, then you get a different coloured pen and you draw a journey through this world. And then you just imagine that things happen along this journey. So maybe Smudge and Bartholomew the monkey are in their enchanted boat and they sail past Lone Crag and discover something extraordinary. Maybe they are kidnapped at Ghost Wreck. Maybe they are reunited with an old friend at the Northswirl. And then bit by bit, you suddenly realise that a whole plot is unfolding simply through drawing a journey through a magical land. It doesn't need to be a magical land. You could draw your map with landmarks from where you live. But a journey is often a really good idea of getting your plot going. A writer, Vladimir Nabokov, once said that the writer's job is to get the main character up a tree. And then once they're up there, chuck rocks at them. He doesn't literally mean chuck rocks at your main characters. He means make things happen to your main characters, because that instigates action. And then you've got an exciting plot. So you've got your map. You know what your magical kingdom or your ordinary kingdom, you know what your world looks like. Then you've got to think about your transport. And I think if you're wanting to write a really exciting adventure, jazz up your transport. Go a bit quirky. So in Jungle Drop, the glow-in-the-dark rainforest, the characters zip from place to place on enchanted unicycles powered by jungle spit. So the enchanted trees are all connected, the treetops, by glow-in-the-dark vines, creepers. And if you've got an enchanted unicycle, you can balance along those creepers and zip from tree to tree. In Rumblestar, you've got this sky kingdom up above the clouds. So the characters travel by magical hot air balloon, and these hot air balloons are powered by dragon fire. This is one called Zip, and you can see Casper Tock falling out of the hot air balloon. Casper Tock is another unlikely hero. He hates risks and is allergic to adventures, but he ends up finding his way through a grandfather clock into a magical kingdom. And there he meets Utterly Thankless, a girl who loves risks and loves adventures. And they go on this epic voyage or adventure together. So your transport, jazz it up a bit. Take an ordinary method of transport and turn it on its head. And that makes it really exciting, because if your characters are running from A to B the whole time, it gets a bit boring to write and boring to read. But if you've got exciting methods of transport, like in the Harry Potter books, you've got the Hogwarts Express or that flying car that Ron and Harry ride in. In Everdark, you've got an enchanted boat called the Coddywomple. The Coddywomple is actually a real word. It means to travel in a purposeful manner towards a vague direction or destination. It's a bit like life at the moment, isn't it? Travelling purposefully out of the lockdowns, but sort of where are we all going? So the Coddywomple looks like an ordinary boat, but if you do something to it, suddenly that unlocks all sorts of secret magic. So jazz up your transport. Number 3, think about some objects, often magical objects if you're writing a magical book, and think about some objects that your main character could be given to help them along their quest or along their journey. If it's not a magical book you're writing, if it's a straight up adventure set in our world, it can be ordinary objects that they're given, a letter which has some secrets about the past that no one else knew, and that could be really valuable for the adventure, or a letter from a friend disclosing a secret. So magic for me, magical objects, let me see. In Everdark, behind me, the characters are given a sweetie that looks a bit like a wine gum. But actually, my wine gums are water gums. They taste like seaweed, they're disgusting. But if you get past that and swallow one, actually you're enabled to breathe, sing, burp, laugh, giggle, whatever, underwater. So they're hugely important. And I often think the best kind of magic hinges on the possible. Take an ordinary object and flip it, twist it, and then you get a magical object for your characters. So in Rumblestar, the characters are given, or they find, a blank sheet of paper. Looks really useless. But actually in Rumblestar, if you dip the paper into water, words appear, and it becomes the kingdom's newspaper, the Unmapped Chronicle. In Jungle Drop, the glow-in-the-dark rainforest, the two main characters, Fox and Fibber, petty squabble. They're twins, and they do nothing but fight at the beginning of the book. That's why they're called petty squabble. Fox and Fibber, petty squabble, are told, you've got to save the day, you've got to save the whole world. And they're given a spoon to do it. Can you imagine anything more useless to save the world than a spoon? Only this isn't an ordinary spoon. It's a fable spoon instead of a tablespoon. And it's imbued with all sorts of magic, which the characters can use to save the day. So if you've got a kitchen at home and you've got that drawer in the kitchen that's filled with loads of junk that no one uses, odd keys, sometimes like sellotape, a feather, an old glove, whatever, rootle around in that drawer, pick out objects and look at those objects and say, what if this could do something extraordinary? Those two words, what if, are enough to spark an entire story. What if all the grown-ups have got it wrong about our weather and there's magic involved? What if, with an ordinary object, and then you've often got a really good idea to spark a story. So number 4 is the message. So on the surface of things, I write adventure books, and they're filled with magic and danger and humour, and that's all well and good. And in this adventure book, you've got Smudge and Bartholomew on this voyage to save the world. But underneath all that, I've also got something else going on. I've got what I'm really writing about, and that is ordinary people who go on to save the world, people who don't look special or particularly skilled, but who have qualities like kindness and courage and curiosity, and how important those are. Because sometimes it is the truly unextraordinary people who go on to battle monsters, defeat monsters, and save worlds. They're the ones that nobody notices at first, but they're filled with incredible courage, kindness, and curiosity. So if you want to be a writer, I'm going to finish with my top 3 tips, and then we'll do questions. You guys can ask anything at all about reading, writing, whatever. So if you guys want to be a writer, number 1, carry a notepad with you everywhere. As a writer, you're like a detective. You just watch the world fiercely for the things that other people miss. Then you write those things down. If, like me, you're often outside and you want to be writing about oceans and hills and forests, trees, then get a notepad with a hard back, because then you can be halfway up a tree and you can still write because you can lean on that hard back notebook. Number 2, look up and out from your screens. This is hard, especially in lockdown, because we're on our screens more than ever to do remote learning at times or things like this, remote festivals. But one day the world will open up, and we're going to have to remember that life is about so much more than our screens and about seeing each other face to face. And there is so much wonder out there, wonder in the wild, wonder in friendships and being with other people. And nobody, I literally mean nobody, is going to get to the grand old age of 98 years old and look back on their life and say, do you know what? Looking back on it all, I just wish I'd spent some more time on my mobile phone. No one's going to say that. You know, we used to walk down the street and we see everyone looking down on their phones. We've got to remember to look up and out, because the world is full of wonder and we are so lucky to live on this planet. We've got to look up and out and enjoy the wonder on our doorstep. And number 3, never be afraid to fail. So it took me 7 years, 3 failed books, and 96 rejection letters from literary agents to get my first book deal. So if I'd given up, I'd never have these books out now. I wouldn't be a writer. There's a film producer looking at one of my books to hopefully make it into a film, but I'd never have that opportunity if I'd given up. So if you guys have got something you think you could be quite good at, it doesn't need to be writing. It could be music, sport, drama. It could be that you are ridiculously kind and you could work for a charity and change this world. If you've got something, try so hard in it and never be afraid to fail, because it's the people who are brave enough to get it wrong who usually get where they want to go. Now, we are going to do some questions now, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see me a little bit bigger in a second. If anybody wants a signed copy of any of my books, then you can head over to the festival website. I believe it's bookshop.wigtownbookfestival.com. But in the meantime, we're going to do questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There we go. And go back onto, there we go. Hopefully that has stopped sharing and I've got some questions filling in. Here we go. So I'm going to answer my first question from Primary 3 at Lockerbie Primary. Hi guys, wish I could be in your classroom. They would like to know, how do you come up with the ideas for your very first book? And then they have another question, which is, what is your next book going to be about? So how did I come up with ideas for my very first book? I think I just thought back to my childhood. I think it was growing up in Scotland. You guys live in the best country. I've lived in London for 15 years and I moved up in January, and wow, there are more stories up in Scotland for sure. So I used my childhood, and sometimes it was things outside. Sometimes it was just things my brothers, I've got 2 younger brothers, they said funny things and I wrote them down years later and put them in a book. It's just keeping your eyes open and being curious about the world around you, looking up and out from those screens that I think spark stories. And you have another question, Lockerbie Primary. What is your next book going to be about? So the Crackledawn Dragon is the 4th and final book in the Unmapped Chronicles series. Comes out in June. And in it, there is a really cool girl called Uni, who captains a boat called the Kerfuffle. There's a boy called Zebedee Bolt, and he runs away from home and has vowed never to trust anybody ever again. But then he meets Uni, this girl who captains the boat, and her pet chameleon, Mrs. Fickletint, who can talk, and he learns a lot about trust. And there is a dragon called Snaggle who feeds on secrets. And there is a mer creature called Perpetual Faff, and she does nothing but be flustered through the whole book. She's a bit like my mum. So that is all coming your way in June. And then after that, and I just started today, this morning, thinking about this, I've been asked to write a sequel to one of the most famous children's books that there's ever been. And I'm not allowed to say what it is yet, but the news will come out soon. But I'm going to be doing a really cool new book soon. So more on that. And I'll probably put some, I'm going to get my website updated and I'll put some info on there and my Instagram and Twitter and things. So thank you, Lockerbie Primary. I've got a question, another one from Ava in Primary 3 at Lockerbie Primary. How long does it take you to write a book? Do you know, it probably takes me about a year, 6 months to come up with the idea and to plan the story. You don't need to plan your stories if you are one of the people that can just launch in and your ideas come. I think with my dyslexia, I find it easier to plan. It makes me feel more confident because I've got the structure there. But you don't have to. It takes me 6 months because I've got that planning to do, and then 6 months to write the book and edit it and do changes with my editor. So when I was your age, I used to hand my story into my teacher and I'd think, that's quite good. And then the teacher would say, I think you should put 37 similes in the opening paragraph. I think you should put every metaphor there ever was in the finishing paragraph. And I was like, shut up. And then I got to the grand old age of 36, which is what I am now. And I get an editor and she says, I think you should put a prologue at the beginning of Sky Song to set the scene for all the magic. And I always am like, oh, shut up. And then I go home and I put the prologue in. And now when I get fan mail, letters from children, they often say things like, my favourite part of Sky Song was the prologue. So writers are people who are humble enough to take criticism from their teachers and their friends and their editors, but determined enough to bounce back and to make that book better. A question from Isla. Have you ever had an idea that you haven't found the right story for yet? Yes. Really cool question the whole time. Sometimes ideas are just biding their time. I go for, when I can't think of anything to write about, I go running. I live on the beach in East Lothian, near North Berwick and Gullen, and I run down the beach every weekend. And I run one way down the beach and I don't stop until I've got a good idea for a book. And then I start coming back again. Sometimes I don't get an idea for so long. I think, oh my gosh, I'm going to end up in Edinburgh. I'm going to run so far. But every time I run past an island called Fidra Island. And it's incredible. It's got this arch of stone and you can see the sky and the sea through that arch. It's so cool. And I think that belongs in a book. And actually, Robbie Louis Stevenson, who wrote Treasure Island, apparently he based his map for Treasure Island on that very island, Fidra. But no one's written a children's book recently about Fidra Island, and I want to. So that's an idea I've got, but I haven't written yet. So 100% you get ideas that are just biding their time. And I mean, it took me until I was 23 years old to write my first book, The Dream Snatcher. I had ideas for that when I was 8. So yeah, ideas don't have to be written down straight away. You can let them turn in your head for ages first. I've got a question from Andy. Which of the kingdoms from your book would you most like to visit? I love snow. I've always wanted to live in a snowy kingdom. So Sky Song is one of my favourite books to write because I loved snowy books as a child. Northern Lights by Philip Pullman, Wolf Brother by Michelle Paver, Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, Wolves of Willoughby Chase, even fairy tales like The Snow Queen. So I wanted to write my own snow kingdom. So definitely I'd like to live there. There's things like Erkin Bears and secret tree houses, and it'd be cool to live in Erkenwald. But I also love the idea that there could be a kingdom up above the sky and the clouds. So I'm looking out my window behind you guys now, and it's a cloudy day. But I don't know if you guys have ever been in an aeroplane. And when the aeroplane leaves, let's say Glasgow airport or whatever, or Aberdeen airport, it's kind of rainy and cloudy. And you think, oh, it's a rubbish day. Then the aeroplane bursts through the clouds and suddenly it's beautiful blue sky. And there's this layer of clouds and it looks like another kingdom. And I always think, surely there's a magical world up there. And so I imagined it in Rumble Stars. This is one of my favourite books to write as well. And I love the idea of living in a kingdom up above the clouds. Question from Simon. Do you prefer to write another story in the same kingdom or invent a new one each time? So with the Unmapped Chronicles books, I've got a new story set in each different kingdom. And I like that because my characters are a little bit like, it's like they have head torches on. And when they go through these kingdoms, it's like I discover these kingdoms for myself. So when I write about them, I discover, oh, there's drizzle hags living along the witch's fingers, or there are snow trolls living in shiverbark forest. And I didn't know that when I drew the kingdom. But then when my characters start exploring those kingdoms, I find these things out. So yeah, I definitely think that I enjoy writing about different kingdoms with each book. But there is something to be said for going back to a kingdom you've written about once before and the joy of that. So Everdark is set in Crackledawn, and the Crackledawn dragon that comes out in June is also set in Crackledawn to begin with anyway. And I had a lot of fun going back to a kingdom that I'd explored a little bit in Everdark, but I suddenly realized there was so much more to it when I went back to write the Crackledawn dragon. I've got a question from Lucy in Glasgow. Hi, Lucy. What books do you like to read? Did you like to read when you were growing up? So I'm a big fan of Roald Dahl. And when I was younger, I love Roald Dahl books because they dealt with huge issues about, I don't know, families and friendships and joy and sadness and loss, but in a really simple, clear way, and with buckets of humor. And I love that. I love the BFG. I love, you know, the flesh lump eating giant, the words that Roald Dahl uses. He's my biggest inspiration for naming my own characters and finding quirky, fun words and names. So the BFG, Matilda, the Twits, they were so awful and odious with the food stuck in their beard. I loved the Narnia books, the Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe series. A little bit later, I loved Mildred Hubble in The Worst Witch. Mildred Hubble is a pretty hopeless heroine. She can't tie her shoelaces properly. She's got really unbrushed hair. She's late for everything, but she's fiercely loyal and incredibly kind. And those values, those attributes are so important in the world. And so I learned a lot about kindness and how to be a good friend from Mildred Hubble. I think I learned a lot about what it means to be a girl by reading Lyra Silvertongue, the character, the heroine from Northern Lights by Philip Pullman. She taught me that girls can be just as brave as boys, grown-ups, and as brave as armoured polar bears. So I learned a lot about that, about being a girl and enjoying adventures outside and being just as tough as boys from her. Question from Daniel. Do you have a favourite character and what makes them your favourite? So there's a character in Rumblestar who I really like called Slumbergrot. He's the giant, a sleeping cloud giant, and the castle in Rumblestar is built on his back. And every time Slumbergrot works his way up to say something really important, he falls asleep. And he's based on my dad, who every time he works his way up to say, impart some pearls of wisdom to me in my life, he falls asleep. So Slumbergrot, utterly thankless, the girl in this. I named her after a butter, Utterly Butterly. If you guys know that butter, I thought it was such a ridiculous name that I had to spin a character off that. So I got Utterly Thankless from Utterly Butterly. She's one of my favourite characters. And in Everdark, the monkey Bartholomew, he's really funny, like him a lot as well. Guys, these questions have been brilliant. Thank you so much for asking such fantastic questions. I wish I could have been with you guys face to face, but it's been a joy speaking to you today. I hope you have a great Easter holiday when it comes around. And thank you very, very much for having me, Big Dog Festival. Bye.